so I haven't had a chance.
Forever.
No, it's yeah, no, it's like gone.
Wait, Joseph, my question is, why are you
I'm gonna take a
I'll
grade.
tell you after.
Okay.
I'll look at it.
I'm just curious. I can always look at my phone.
Yeah,
be like our students.
All the stuff I'm distracting myself with.
I don't open my gummy worms before it's yes, I just went and bought this big bag of gummy worms because the sugar in my chai wasn't enough. Would you like a gummy worm?
There's no sugar in my green tea.
I like this color hydroflask. It looks like a Stanley. It is.
That's my wife's old one.
All right,
I
guys,
have my
grab
one
your
for water.
attention in 3, 2, 1. Come on in, man.
Sorry.
Hey, no, you're good. So, my presentation is on autism, and let's get straight into it. So, today we will be answering the following. First, what is autism spectrum disorders? And what are some of its characteristics? What are some of the major misconceptions separating fact from myth? And next, what are the educational implications and best practices we can use as educators moving forward, working with kids who have ASD? And lastly, we're going to cover some of the local, state, and national resources for students and teachers to help with educating students with ASD. All right, so who here has done drop-in reading before? Okay, so yeah, that has. We were at the same training. So how it works is I'm going to read the light gray, and you guys are going to read the bolded. Make sense? You guys with me? All right, let's do it. So autism, as defined by the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, refers to a
Developmental disability
significantly
Affecting verbal
and
nonverbal
communication
and
social interaction.
generally evident before the age 3 that
adversely
affects
a child's.
educational performance.
So that's ASD. Thank you for participating. Appreciate it. Next, some of the characteristics of autism. So we're gonna do the same thing just for the first part, and then I'll explain the last part. So bear with me. Other characteristics often associated with autism are engaging in
repetitive activities
and
stereotyped movements
resistance to
environmental change
or
change in daily routines
and unusual responses to.
sensory experiences.
So to cover a couple of those, so like unusual fixation. So for instance, my nephew, one of the stories that I have about him that we kind of thought like, wait, maybe something's going on here. On Easter, he would only pick up the green Easter eggs. All that, you think for like a 18-month-old kid, he'd be getting all of them, right? He was only picking up the green ones. Another thing. So inability to focus without first completing a routine. Students with ASD often need routine in their lives, and when they get out of that routine, it affects them greatly. And that can lead to some disruptive behavior. So when the ordinary schedule is interrupted, I know that I've seen kids do a lot of the behaviors that we saw in the video that we watched before. Also, unusual communication habits. I know a kid who, a student that I worked with, who spoke mostly through like lines from Disney movies, and it was you could kind of get what he was saying, but it was mostly like those type of lines, and it's kind of unusual. And also difficulty understanding social interactions. Like, what does it mean? What is good touch versus bad touch? Like, why don't you just come up behind somebody and hug them? Or why don't, those sort of things. All right. So now we're going to get into some interactive activities where we will interact with each other. So first, our purpose is what misconceptions and myths do you hear from Jenny McCarthy about autism. And then we're going to turn and talk for 90 seconds, right? So I might cut this a little bit short depending. So here we go. What are misconceptions?
American Morning, the most news in the morning, period. Weekdays 6 Eastern.
Evan was diagnosed with autism in 2005. Without a doubt in my mind, I believe vaccinations triggered Evan's autism. We do believe because we were the witness with our child, our first-hand witness after we came home from the doctor's office and saw this regression of a child that was perfect and then slowly fading away. The American Academy of Pediatrics and others continue to say that there is no link between vaccines and autism. They go on to say that the risk of not vaccinating could be even worse. What do you say about why, first of all, they're reluctant to talk about any possible link between vaccines and autism? Well, when you really think about it, the reason why is because there is such a huge business in pharmaceuticals. Paul Offit is one of these doctors who said one of the reasons why fear of vaccines exists is because of the power of the anecdote, as he puts it. We're up against personal and compelling stories, and we have to find a way to make real science more compelling. He's somebody who also says that there are preventable diseases that people are dying from, that children are dying from because they're not getting vaccinated. People are also dying from vaccinations. Evan, my son, died in front of me for 2 minutes. So you ask any mother in the autism community if we'll take the flu, the measles, over autism any freaking day of the week. So I think they need to wake up and stop hurting our kids. And we're not telling people not to vaccinate. I don't understand why it's so freaking hard to comprehend we deserve safe shots. And a safer schedule.
You have been able to say.
All right, so I'm going to cut her off there. So now what I'm going to do, guys, what we're going to do, we got a visual clock up here. I want you to turn and talk to your elbow partner. If you need a group of 3, that's fine. What are the misconceptions and myths that you heard? Go.
Unqualified. That's
good, though. That's the right answer.
Implications are offensive that your kid is like ruined now because they're autistic. Yeah.
Using personal experience to try to...
Yeah, so now he's imperfect. Yeah. I would be very honestly. Like, she's caused so many problems. This big outbreak that's happening in Washington right now in Portland of measles is because people like her spreading misinformation. Like, some of you are saying, are you getting McCarthy? And then all of a sudden you say about science. Like, are we more likely to die from measles than a vaccine?
Let's talk about it. And we brought up the research on it. Let's talk about this.
This is like a hill that I was on.
Everything has made this small.
I think for my bio classes, maybe that's good. But I want to talk about like how vaccines work so that people understand. Like you can't get sick with a vaccine.
All right, guys. Count your attention in 3, 2, and 1. So let's share out. What were some of the I heard a couple of really good ones from over here. What was one of the misconceptions, guys? Who has one?
It's just like the either or of like comparing. Would you rather your child I would rather my child be like get the measles or something that's supposed to be autistic. We thought that was a pretty red flag.
Okay.
Like we didn't know.
All right. What's another one, guys? Go ahead.
We were talking about that anecdotal evidence. You know, like I have a story that supports what I'm saying, so then it must be true.
And Brett, you said
Using a personal story of her child dying before her eyes. When
it's powerful, right?
Die.
That's powerful. But from autism, right? You're dying from autism. Maybe some complications that led to that, but like it's kind of out there, right? And last one. Go ahead, Brett.
Just like the language she used when she said like that she had a perfect child and she watched it regress before her eyes.
So, yeah, go ahead. Last one.
She's talking about if you give all your vaccinations to your kid at once, don't they tend to become sluggish or something? I heard something about
So,
Dude, you're a science.
so we're gonna get into some facts about this.
Yeah.
But I think the major misconceptions are that one, well, she goes on later to say that her child recovered from autism and that he is completely fine and like also. Yeah, so I cut her off. I'm sorry. We don't have forever to watch this, but it's really interesting because it's the difference between anecdotal and scientific evidence.
Scientifical.
Very, very important. Here we go. Let's get to our next slide if it wants to work. All right, here we go. So some myths of that. I wanted to include this partly because we have the measles outbreak that's going on in Portland, but the MRR vaccine thought to cause autism. It was kind of only like a side note of the medical article that it was in. It was more about like the digestive issues, and it was just kind of like put in there at the end. There's no evidence that gives credence to the claim. And the scientist that made that connection later lost his license because of a conflict of interest, because his name was on a patent for a measles, a new measles cure. So he could have benefited financially from people not vaccinating their kids and then getting the measles and then getting that cure. So and lastly, they later retracted their claims. In the mind for like public health. All right, so you guys know what the deal is. We're gonna watch a video. I want you to think what evidence-based teaching practices can you use for your students. Here we go.
There are a number of things that I see teachers doing right that really optimizes, in some cases guarantees the success of their students with autism. Teachers teaching in many different ways, understanding that kids have different learning styles. A child with autism does not do well if they're expected to sit for long periods of time where the teacher teaches primarily through talking and through lecture. Children and people with autism in general do much better by experiential learning, what we refer to as a multimodal fashion. They learn by seeing, touching, experiencing, doing, not just by processing what's being said to them. Making sure that the child with autism can demonstrate what they're good at. In Uniquely Human, I give an example of a music teacher who had no special training for working with kids with autism. But when kids with autism came in with all of the typical kids in the class, he always made sure to have them involved in a way they could demonstrate what they were good at. So one child had perfect pitch and a beautiful singing voice. And this teacher actually taught that child to sing an aria from Aida. So making sure that the playing field is leveled a little bit is a very, very important principle. Talk respectfully and they act respectfully to children with autism. A specific example of that is if a child's having difficulty, a teacher would not say anything that's perceived as negative about the child in front of all the other children. Because very often people with autism understand a lot more than we think they understand. Sometimes it might look like a child is looking away, is not interested, is not understanding, and that's not the case. They may be processing a lot more information. So speaking respectfully and acting respectfully is very, very important. Helping a child with autism anticipate what's going to be happening. So some people feel, and we've been writing about this for years, that when things are predictable, that helps a person with autism. And again, that helps all of us in life. It's not just teachers who do things well. I often interact with principals, in some cases assistants and superintendents of schools, and when I go into a school system and see that children with autism are valued as members of the community, and the principal demonstrates that in his or her interactions with the children who have autism, and they model that for the teachers, it creates a community of compassion, it creates a community of understanding, And it helps parents feel so good that their child is in a setting and in a community where they are valued.
Sweet. All right, guys, so you know the deal. What are some evidence-based teaching practices that you can use with your students? Turn and talk, please.
I would say mostly normal, so having a variety of things on activities that will all take it in my body.
Using our styles and stuff.
I think having like structured kind of class, but having some autism switching like throughout the meeting, so it's like you have the same structure. You can explain to them like how the days are going, but you can still add some differentiation.
I think that that's important too. Giving them like a view of what we're doing. That's the reading class and stuff kind of makes
And just like any of the other things you talked about, like those are things that are beneficial for everyone. But if you do like have people that need to incorporate that.
That's a real weird way to get to that. Yeah, you're right.
While these specifically are they help out everybody.
And that helps their confidence when they engage in other things that they may not as active. So if you find those opportunities to practice, you do something that's good at, you get confidence.
All right, can I have your attention in 3, 2, finish your last thought, 1. All right, so what are some practices that you can use with your students? Who's got one? Or what are some that you liked? Go ahead.
You know, one particular instance of a student on the spectrum having a wristwatch and a copy of the schedule is essential. Those things went away.
9 day, right?
Yeah.
Know what to expect. Anything else that you think you might use? So knowing what to expect is important. What else? Go ahead.
I mean, allowing them to do other things besides sitting there and just writing notes down or something. So, like last term I had a student who had autism, and he loves to draw. So it was really simple to turn an assignment into something that he could have to draw, and then he'd be, one, not bothering other students or being distracted, but could actually be doing creating something. So.
That's a really good one. I'm happy you brought that up. It's visual over verbal. If I just stand up here and yeah, tune out, right? We all do that, right? DG, you had one last one.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
I was just worried about using routines. I'm not really in favor of that in my class. Or that activities, but if ever I have an autistic child, I was wondering if separating him in a different table and giving him his choices, I'm not sure if it's a good.
It's a little bit, and obviously depends on the child. But typically, like, you can change stuff up, but if you've got like a visual schedule for them, like, hey, this is what, first we're doing this, next we're doing this, and then we're gonna change it up today, and you know it's coming, and we got this, right? And it's just, it takes a little bit extra work, but it negates some of those behaviors. All right, guys, awesome job. Let's get to the next one. Oh, one more time. All right, so the educational implications. Do you guys want to do the drop-in reading again? Or? Yeah. No? Kyle said yes, we're doing it.
This is the last one.
All right. So,
Kyle's doing it by himself.
I'll do it. Ready. Here we go. Due to the aforementioned traits,
Educating a student
with the condition that falls within the autism spectrum can prove to be challenging. Students with
autism.
With autism often face
academic barriers.
such as, and let's get into it, trouble following directions, not knowing what's happening, and trouble following directions, a hampered ability to communicate, disinterest in academics, or disinterest in general, and disruptive behavioral problems, right? So, what might those look like? Has anybody seen any in their practicum? Go ahead.
So if I give, was that?
No, you first.
Okay.
Yeah, you're good.
If I give like one direction to the student, then it'll be followed. But if I give them like 3, they'll probably do the first one, and the second one maybe, or maybe not. And then they seem sincere when I'm like, you remember what you're supposed to do, and they don't.
Yeah.
No, you said to do this, and then something else. And they're like, oh. But I don't think they're faking it. I think they can't.
And that trouble. No, sorry. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
That's trouble following multi-step oral directions, right? Go ahead.
I have one of my students who is on the spectrum, and he struggles with, like, he will say very loudly, blurt out some things if, like, he's really excited about a topic. Like, he really likes World War I, and so he will often impulsively blurt out facts that he knows, whether or not the situation is appropriate for it.
And knowing what is appropriate is a huge, I don't want to say barrier, but that can be a challenge, right? All right, here we go. Again, you guys know what to do. I want you to think about how can you differentiate for your students. Here we go. Oh, is that too quiet? Or is it good?
Hello, I'm one of your students with high functioning autism, which used to be called Asperger's syndrome. As my teacher, I have 5 things that I would like for you to know about me, and these things may help you teach me better. The first thing is this: I have a visual learning style. A lot of the information presented in class is oral, but I have difficulty processing oral language quickly. So, presenting information visually, when possible, is very helpful to me. The second thing is this: please don't demand that I maintain eye contact with you when you're talking to me, especially if you're mad at me for some reason. I have much difficulty with eye contact. Limited eye contact is part of my disorder, so please don't confuse it with inattention. The third thing, please don't assume that when I look off into space that I'm not listening. What appears to you to be lack of attention may not be that at all. In fact, when I'm doodling on some paper or staring off into space, I'm actually trying to focus on what you're saying. If you think I'm not listening, feel free to ask me a question related to the lesson to check if I'm actually listening. Fourth, please help me with transitions. I have difficulty moving from one activity to the next. If a typical school day is loaded with a lot of transitions, my anxiety level will probably increase. So please coach me through the transitions. And using the visual schedules to help me prepare for moving on to the next task will be very helpful. And the last thing is this: please make allowances for my sensory issues. I'm often distracted by things in the classroom that limit my ability to focus. For example, the breeze from an open window feels like a gust of wind, or the bright sunshine pouring through the window is blinding to me. Sometimes the smell of food from the cafeteria makes me feel sick sometimes. Also, the ticking of the clock sometimes seems like the beating of a drum. This sensory overload can be overwhelming and makes it hard to focus.
All right, guys. You know what to do. Turn and talk, please.
No, but you could do like a white noise
Because I think that just like the spectrum is a lot of
I don't think that's the full
I don't see
because I would have already been driven crazy by that myself.
my classes, different
Really?
different requirements.
And then they
but most of the time, now I got personal requests not being like
You're like blinded.
and are allowed to draw. And I even my first day of school or class, I asked all the kids to fill in like
calling it out.
And like you can tell when they're
I don't. No, I'm not making that rule. I just.
it's subtle. Yeah.
Alright guys, finish your last thought. And 3, 2, 1. So, what are some that you like? What are some questions you have? And what do you think you could use?
So one question I came up with, like some of the sensory stuff that might have to do with what other students in your classroom may be doing, whether like say someone has some food or something that's causing a problem. What's the balance where we want to just be understanding and maybe not overreacting to what a student might be going through, or should we limit other people? Does that make sense?
No, I think I understand what you're saying, and I overheard your guys' conversation a little bit. Like, I think Carly said, you know, if the clock is bothering them, do we take the clock off the wall?
Yeah, right.
Yeah, but I mean, I think it's making allowances for those sorts of things, but you know, within reason, obviously, because we have, you know, some of us have 40 students in our class, you know, and it's differentiating more of like the education and the schedule and those sort of things to be able to help meet those learning and comprehension goals for our students. So I guess that line depends on the student.
Yeah, and I felt like a lot of this was to kind of just to be understanding.
Yeah,
right? Like,
exactly.
The eye contact, don't take it like as an affront to your position as a teacher. It's like just.
That's the thing, knowing the questions to ask, because I really like that you brought that point up, because being sensitive to that, if there is an issue going on, it could just be the smell of the cafeteria or something, and just knowing to ask those questions or something, like, is there a reason for what's happening?
Anybody else want to share? Yeah, go ahead.
I think, well, too, I obviously have reading like any of the accommodations that they need, but having a conversation with them can help a lot. I've noticed that just engaging in conversation, or if they even try to engage in conversation with you, just kind of build a personal relationship, and a lot of times they'll tell you what they need or what they want, or things that they've experienced that other teachers have like tried or failed or anything like that. Because a lot of the times, like, they didn't just develop autism, they're in high school now, so they've obviously been dealing and being a part of the process for a lot of time. But obviously there's some things you can do that aren't going to be able to be communicated, but sometimes having a conversation and building a personal relationship can help create that.
That's awesome. I like. Okay, go ahead. Go.
Sort of building on what I was saying, like, my younger sister was diagnosed with Asperger's at 24 years old, and so a lot of these kids may not know that's what's going on. And one thing that I heard a lot from Rachel growing up was that, like, things would bother her. You know, she'd be distracted by noise or other kids or sensory issues, and so she'd tell the teacher, like, hey, this is bothering me, and the response that she always got was, that's not a good enough reason for that to be bothering you. And so being aware that, like, if, you know, you've got a kid that seems distracted by the smell of the cafeteria, and you're thinking, well, I mean, yeah, we're all hungry, it's almost lunch. Like, be sensitive to the fact that that might be bothering that kid more than you're aware of.
Okay, and Gigi, last one before we move on.
I was just wondering, all of those that were mentioned there, then are those really like all of those are really the traits, or one could have these when they come like that?
Yeah, and
I don't know.
I think that's one of the things that I want to try to hit home with this presentation is all kids with ASD are different, just like all people without ASD are different. You know, like it all depends on the kid. And like I heard Brett was saying that he sat in on an IEP, and like they're individual, right? That's what the I stands for in IP, right? It's individual. Thanks. Thanks for bringing that. All right, let's get to the next one. So, kind of wrapping it up a little bit. So we got some important takeaways and also some technology that you can use. So, all people with ASD are different, like I just said. Just like everybody without ASD is different. There's no evidence supporting that the claim of vaccines cause autism. There's no evidence supporting that. Be differentiated. Teach to multiple learning styles. Be visual over auditory or verbal. And be respectful. And model that respect for other students and other colleagues. Right? The last bit are some assistive technologies. So we can see, I'll bring your attention to the up in the corner. This is where I was going to use the pointer. But video modeling of all kinds of tasks. Verbal, like social narratives, like what good touch is or bad touch is. You know, like you can shake hands, you can give a high five, but you can't come up and grab somebody. You know. Also, this is a really cool one, the picture exchange communication, or PIC, which is essentially kids who are nonverbal, have nonverbal ASD. They can go, I want to go to the bathroom, and they just click on the pictures, and it verbalizes it for them, right? It's really powerful, letting kids be able to communicate what their needs are, and then they're not throwing the bowl at you because they're hungry, right? And last, we can use visual timers. Visual timers are a great way to let kids know how much time they have to still work, or how much time they still have to work. And sensory, there's all kinds of like sensory tools that different kids like. Some kids, they need earmuffs on, right, because there's too much going on. Some kids, you know, need like a trampoline or something soft or something to chew on. It all depends on the individual. So here are some local and state and national resources. I got a lot of my information from them and also from our book. I would encourage you to go check out, especially the Childhood Health Association of Salem, Oregon. They have a huge list of resources. So if you have a student that has ASD and you're like, where do I start? That's where you start. Last, there's my references, and thank you for sitting through my presentation. Yes, sir. Here you go. Top one is the best one, because it's got everything all together. Thank you. All right. You got it there?